Hey guys, Patrick here from Keller Williams. Today we're going to be discussing the 5 different factors that affect the real estate market for us here in Hawaii. Some of these factors are more specific to Hawaii directly, and some of them are on a national real estate market basis. The 5 the 5 factors that affect us here in Hawaii, and which will help you understand where the market's going, is tourism, local markets, military, U.S. markets. And finally, just simple miscellaneous stuff. So basically, like what's going on with interest rates and political changes happening that might affect, taxes or things of that nature. So let's dive into the first one, tourism. Tourism is in Hawaii is one of our biggest imports. It's how a lot of people make money. It's how people can afford to buy homes. If they have a job, then they have money. If they have money, they can buy a home, right? And those jobs are affected by how much tourists actually come here, spend money, and utilize those services, those products. So we can actually see this year, and again this is for February 2019, we can see that we did have an increase in people showing up to the islands this year compared to last year. We had a 3% increase in the amount of arrivals from last year to this year. Now the interesting thing that's really not that big of a deal, and there's an article here that goes over it, is that we have more people showing up, but it seems that they're spending less money. I've got a couple different theories on why that is, whether it's technology coming into play and allowing people to find better deals and bargains and spend less, Airbnb's coming up, so not as many people are spending tons of money at hotels, which spending money at their restaurants and all that stuff. So there's a lot of different factors that come in there, but at the end of the day, what's important is that more people are showing up from outside of the island. More tourists are showing up, which is influxing the amount of money that's being pushed into the island, which is allowing more jobs, higher incomes, and people to have cash to buy properties, right? And some of these tourists that are coming in are actually going to become homeowners themselves, or maybe investors. So there's a lot of good things that come with an influx or an increase in tourism when it comes to the real estate market. Another thing we saw this month is, I know that I did because I bought a couple tickets, is Southwest has opened up their routes to Hawaii. And now that's going to just further increase the amount of tourists we have coming out here. It's a lot easier to travel to go see other islands, as well as to go back and forth from the mainland to the island. So for obvious reasons, this is going to bring more tourists, more cash, and help our economy out here in the islands grow a bit more, creating more buyers, more cash flow. So with more tourists showing up, we're actually seeing a negative effect on this. With more tourists showing up, the mayor, and we can see that it's been steadily happening every single year, they are increasing their proposed budget requests, saying that they need more money to run the state, right? But the only bummer there is that they're requesting that this is coming through hiking taxes for hotels, for investment properties, and so this is going to have a negative effect on people who are buying properties who are investors. If investors are coming in and they have to pay higher taxes, that might slow down the amount of investors who are involved, or the amount of investors being able to have a certain purchasing power, being able to buy certain properties. So that's kind of the flip side of the tourist influx. It's basically pushing our state legislation to have to request a bigger budget, and to get that bigger budget they need to start implementing certain taxes. Then these specific taxes are affecting the real estate market directly. Now the next thing I want to go over is the local market, and when I say local, I mean the other islands. One thing we can, an ongoing trend that we've seen is that each island has its own different market. And on each island, every single section of the island has its own market, and within each different section, each neighborhood has its own market. But one thing that we do know is that the neighboring islands can allow us to see a certain trend on the good side and bad side of things. Now, the neighboring islands of Oahu, over past years of data, we've noticed that the outer islands are the first to see a decline in their market, and we would be short to follow. And on the flip side, when we see an increase in our market, more homes getting sold, prices, average price going up, there is a spillover, and we start to see that their markets start to come up after ours. So let me repeat that so everybody understands. When the outer islands, Kauai, the Big Island, see a decline in their market, they will see it first, and we will see it after them. When we see an increase in our market, they see it second. So they're the first to see the decline and the last to see the increase in the market. So we can see here from February that we are seeing a decline happening in Kauai and on the Big Island. So we should expect to start to see a similar trend happen over here in Oahu in the near future. So another large factor we like to look at is military. As you may or may not know, we do have a lot of military presence out here. We have a lot of bases, and with all of those bases, we have lots of troops, and those troops need a place to live. So they are actually a large portion of buyers that work out here, also being able to leverage VA loans, which right now are at a pretty low rate compared to conventional loans. But we have seen just this month that there's been an article that came out that said there's been an influx in unautonomous vehicle testing, and they're doing it out here in Hawaii. There was a major, I think it was called some kind of ship. There was a battleship called the Sea Hunter, which they have been testing and deploying in between San Diego and Pearl Harbor, as well as a few other autonomous vehicles and planes. And with all of this influx of new technology and most of it coming over to the island of Hawaii, we're going to see an increase in troops, which increases the amount of people we have that will be looking for homes. So this is another important factor that we like to look at. Is military growing? Is it getting smaller? Is the military moving, or do we have lots of troops moving over here, or do we have more of them leaving here? And as of now, as the current market, we're starting to see an increase in the amount of military presence and population out here on the island of Oahu. Now, the fourth factor we like to look at is what's going on the mainland. What trends, what things are happening in the real estate market on the mainland, and are these things that we need to be aware of because they might be shifting over to our island? As we know, out here in Hawaii, it's beautiful, it's peaceful. Things are a little bit slower here. Whether it's a movie that comes out, whatever it is, usually we get it, but a little bit later. So it's kind of the same thing with the real estate market. One of the big things we saw is that we're starting to see certain states start to put in rent control. Why is this important? Well, for investors or people who own rental properties, this could really put a damper in what you could potentially charge and make from your rental property. So this is something we always like to keep a pulse on, see what's going on, and always see what's going on in the legislation and see if there's any changes or talks of implementing some of these changes, because it can drastically affect your decision and what you buy. Whether it's you buy a certain investment property, you crunch the numbers, know what you can get rent-wise. That might not be the case if there's rent control implemented. So that's something we like to keep an eye on. We also saw a dip in the market on the mainland. Now again, like I said before, and I've said in the past, here in Hawaii, we never really see a dip. We do see things start to flat out just a little bit, or a slight downturn. But again, we like to see what's going on in the U.S. market because we start to see that trend spill over into Hawaii just a few months down the line. So we did see here that in this article in December, there was 11% dip in the housing market on the mainland. And so that's something that will most likely, we're starting to see it start to trend our way. Not as drastic, but it is something that is starting to spill over, and we can see the changes happening in our marketplace. And lastly, any other miscellaneous things that are important that we want to focus on, like interest rates, is the economy growing, things of that nature. We did see a spike in interest rates for a bit, but they did dip back down, and they're starting to steady off. Like I mentioned, we're basically looking at about 4.3, 4.5, depending on who you're working with, and that's for a 30-year mortgage. But we are seeing for VA loans, they're still getting about 3.75. So if you got anything under 4%, you are super pumped. But that's something we like to make sure we keep an eye on. And then, the growth of the economy looks like it's slowing down just a bit. Not a whole lot, but it is slowing down by about 2.6% pace. So that is something that will affect the market. If the economy is not growing and there's a bunch of people making tons of money, then there's less people ready and able to buy. So these are just certain things we like to keep in play and keep in the back of our mind when people ask us, how's the market going, and for us to figure out where's the market going to be in the next 30 days, 90 days, 6 months, a year. And these are just 5 of the factors that we like to look at and help us to educate our buyers or sellers on where the market we think the market is going based off data. So anyways, that's it for now. Thanks again for listening. I'm Patrick along with Keller Williams, and I hope you have a fantastic day. Aloha.